In this episode with Professor Wim Bastiaanssen of TU Delft, we do a deep dive into evapotranspiration algorithms, in particular the SEBAL or the surface energy balance algorithm. Professor Bastiaanssen was the original founder or creator of this algorithm, and over his 40-year career has created multiple such algorithms which have fundamentally transformed the use of satellite imagery and these satellite data products to change the lives of farmers across the world. His work shows how satellite data at scale can improve water security at the farm level, the Canal command level, and finally the basin level. Welcome to the Water Data Podcast. Our guest today, Dr. Wim Bastiaanssen, has spent his career mapping the intersection of technology and hydrology. He is the original developer of SEBAL, the surface energy balance algorithm, which is used in over 80 countries. He has also developed ET-Look, the engine behind FAO's global vapor product, as well as Water Accounting Plus and the SWEO model of water accounting. He's currently a visiting professor at the TU Delft and the IRRI ambassador for Hydrosat. Wim focuses on providing farmers with daily actionable data to optimize irrigation. From the earliest days at the Starting Center to his work at the Asian Development Bank, Wim's mission has remained to use clear, accurate satellite measurements to ensure a secure water future. Welcome to the podcast, Wim.
Thank you, Veena. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask you, it's really an honor to have somebody like you who uses a lot of the core algorithms that we here at Well Labs use. And of course, all kinds of products that we work with are based on your original work from the 1990s. So I was wondering if you could kind of start us off with your early interest in SEBAL. What got you into it? How did that work start?
Yeah, no, thank you. It's good to go back to my roots. Actually, it started when I graduated, and I was involved in a project in Egypt in this particular case, and there were many questions on what happens with the groundwater and who is using the groundwater. And I had the luck to work with a very good professor that already had all kind of ideas on using satellite data for wet water management. So I came in like kind of a warm bed, I could step in and learn from him. And I thought this is really important because you can see in general that measurements by instruments in the field are a bit going down, which is not good. So think about your own money. So you have an income and you get money into your wallet and you want to know, how is my money spent? Do I spend to clothes or to transportation or other things? And the same with water. You really want to know how much water is coming in, how is it used, etc. So the fact that worldwide the intensity of hydrometeorological observatories are going down because they are not maintained, I thought we have to use more satellite images. So then you become a modeler suddenly, and you have to think, okay, what kind of model should I make? And at that time, I thought, okay, it has to be something that we can apply in multiple countries. So it should not be too much empirical that you can only use in one condition or one crop, but it should be an algorithm that can be used for paddy and for sugarcane, but also for forests and river basins. So purposely, SEBAL model was designed to calibrate itself because it's very important that the model gives realistic results, but in different countries. So, and people always say you have to wait for local measurements or calibration, but local measurements is, it's not so easily available. You have to have partners that collect the data. So on purpose, I designed SEBAL in a way that it has hot pixels and cold pixels because we measure the temperature. And then from that, we do a kind of a calibration, and that seems to be one of the success stories that we apply it from Argentina to Japan, from Australia to Canada, and that's very nice that, we have developed the model and we published about it. And now people are using it, as you say, in introduction in many different countries.
So I'm just going to take a step back because not everybody that listens to the podcast is technical.
Okay.
So SEBAL is the surface energy balance algorithm.
Yeah.
And the main problem that you were trying to solve was that you could not measure evapotranspiration,
Correct.
Which is the primary component where rainfall ends up, right? And so what was the kind of state of the art before SEBAL came along? And then what was the specific problem that SEBAL solved? Because that would help people understand why that is such a breakthrough.
So the SEBAL model was, and it still is meant for evapotranspiration, which the actual ET flux. So it's not from weather stations or so, which is reference ET, something else. This is about actual ET, number one. Number two, soil moisture. So we also look at soil moisture in the root zone. Very important because moisture at the surface is less relevant. If we can look into the root zone, we get much more powerful information. And thirdly, SEBAL also gives information on the crop production. Of course, it's very important for farming communities and so on. So this is why it was developed. And what was there before was maybe more some initial research, deep academic research outputs on very complicated models. Okay, it is based on thermal measurements. So we measure the temperature of the land surface, and it works a little bit like the human body. That once you transpire, you sweat, your temperature goes down, and the same with the land and with the crops and with the vegetation and the forests. So if they transpire, the temperature goes down. So we measure the temperature, and actually in the 1980s and 1990s, the thermal images became available. But again, the majority of the algorithms were very advanced, but not easily transferable. Usually only the original developer has to use it. Not even the students could use it. So therefore, SEBAL is much simpler in use because it does not need so many inputs. So that was really the rationale to develop this model.
So what you're saying is because it's not obvious to people how you can measure soil moisture from space, right? It just, and so what you're really doing is to say that when you have incident radiation, it can either make the land hotter or it can be used to evaporate soil moisture into ET. And so if there is no moisture, essentially the land's going to be hotter, and you're using the infrared part of the spectrum, which you can see from space, to infer how the surface temperature, and then you're inferring soil moisture from that, correct?
100%. That's exactly how it works. And what is so nice about this is that if we look at a leaf or a canopy, then it has different individual leaves. And you know what is so nice? One leaf takes the water from maybe 12 centimeters, another leaf maybe from 66 centimeters. But if you measure the total temperature of all the leaves together, you get a depth integrated moisture. So you can really look into the subsoil, which for many people is like hard to believe. Like, how can you look into the subsoil? We cannot, but we use the plant. We use the leaves to really look into the subsoil.
So when you're looking from space, you're going to see some places which are vegetated, where you can see the leaves, and other places where you have bare soil. So how does SEBAL kind of separate? Do you separate using other bands? How do you do that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Many satellites have additional bands, say in the visible part and near infrared, shortwave infrared. And these extra information layers we use to the separation of green and non-green pixels or partial pixels. This information is also added to it. It's always nice to have measurements from different parts of the spectrum, but if we nicely bring them together, then we can get realistic and accurate measurements of ET, evapotranspiration, which, by the way, is a very important thing in the whole water management. More and more we get discussions how much water is evaporated from rice crop or from sugarcane or from forests or wetlands and so on. So it's a very interesting approach, but also opportunity in multiple applications.
So in your early work with SEBAL, did you have ground measurements to kind of cross-verify?
Yes.
And how many of those did you have? Was it primarily in Europe? How did you
Yeah.
go from that to 80 countries?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Usually, there is a classical pathway. You start as a scientist, you have to do your own field work, don't do the field work from others, sweat yourself, work day and night. So I did this for 3 years, actually in Egypt, later on in Spain and in Niger, in Africa. But you have to really also work in the field, watch the conditions, but also understand there is a limitation of field instruments. Very often people want to compare remote sensing estimates to field measurements, which is of course fantastic. But there's always a kind of assumption in the mind of people that field measurements are perfect, 100% accurate, and remote sensing is not. And that is a misconception.
I think the main thing which and I'm jumping a little bit ahead, maybe a teaser of what you speak about in a little bit, but when we saw some of your measurements from space, in a single field, there's so much variability, and field measurements are mostly point measurements, right?
Yeah.
So in a sense, you're inferring that that point, in fact, represents the entire field.
Yeah.
But when you look from space, you can see within a field, there's massive, massive intra-field variation.
Absolutely.
So your sensor could be correct, but it could just not be representative.
Absolutely. This is an effect. And this happens especially if you have instruments with this very small footprint, like sometimes soil moisture probes or a soil heat flux plate. And they really measure a very small footprint. So if you want to compare that with satellite information, you have to pick that one particular pixel, for the comparison. You cannot take the average of a field. You have to go to that one pixel and then compare. We usually, these days, we work with 10-meter pixels, so it's a kind of okay. But if you measure, for instance, ET from flux towers, they have a larger footprint. So it depends a little bit on
what is the ground measurement.
Yeah, what is the ground measurement? Also the purpose that you want to validate. But I think it's very important that, you always start first doing this yourself. And later on, I realized it's perhaps even more valuable that professors in the world that I have never spoken to, do the same. And they also come with the same statements of accuracy and validation. It's very important, to make something more like a global tool. And that in a kind of unintentionally happened with SEBAL.
If you're enjoying this episode, don't forget to subscribe and explore more conversations on the channel. Share this episode with your colleagues, friends, or anyone interested in water and sustainability. And tell us about yourself in the comments. Are you a student, a professional, or just curious about water? Let us know where you're listening from, and if you'd like to suggest a guest or topics for further episodes. I'm just going to state for the purposes of the audience that you've done satellite work. When I was looking at your papers, you've actually done it for rainfall and for, for a whole variety of things. But I think for today's work, let's focus on evapotranspiration and soil moisture, just so that we can go a little deeper.
Sure.
Once you'd kind of done the algorithm, and as you said, everybody before you had kind of kept it in this very arcane form in a paper. What made you go from there to almost sort of open source the algorithm? What was that journey, and what choices did you make, and why did you make those choices?
It's almost a philosophical question, but I come from a farmer community, and I really did not want the models to be discussed in journal articles. It is a must. It's one of the elements you have to go through. But once you have done these journal publications, then I think you should also think, okay, can I make a better world? Can I really work on water savings? Can I make maybe a contribution to people on a more fair water management and so on? And then I thought, the only way to do that is I involve a larger, a wider audience. And I have to say here that there is an international NGO called ICID. Actually, it is the headquarters in Delhi. Mm-hmm. And they have always been very good on promoting.
This is the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage.
Exactly.
Right?
And they are very good in disseminating new technologies. And they go across country boundaries. So I got in contact with them. And, and then they brought me also to some of the national committees of ICID in other countries. So I could introduce it in other countries and so on. And then I got there also.
So they read your paper and approached you.
Yeah.
And then they opened up sort of the world to you in some way.
Exactly. And then also the user community, because the user community, in this case of irrigation, they like to speak to the irrigation community. They're not going to very complicated scientific journals, you know. I think I have used some international networks to really spread out the technology and the validation, accuracy. And I got professors from the US and professors from Argentina and South Africa and Kazakhstan who really also said, hey, this is nice, you know, how can we help you with the validation and make it broader accepted?
And this was in the early 2000s, right?
Yes, correct.
So the thing that's interesting is there wasn't the internet, or it was just starting off at the time. Now it seems almost obvious to young people because, of course, you have a blog or you have a YouTube channel, GitHub, whatever.
Yeah.
And the code was written for SEBAL originally in C or
it has
Fortran?
been in Fortran and in C and later in Python.
And then how did you physically, were you mailing floppy disks around? I mean, how did that initial...
No, that's a good question. So usually we thought that we do it well or we don't. And doing well means I do that together with the local professor. So I had a very good professor, Rick Allen, I have to mention his name, in the US. And he said, look, why don't you come for a month? We sit together, only you and I. We sit together, we work on the code one by one. We check with the field measurements. And it was very interesting because he said in the USA, we have these very, very accurate field measurements from lysimeters. You know, if you match those values, then the model is good. Was Ameriflux already starting off at that time? No. This was the period of lysimeters. So they were simple devices, and there was a different methodology, not with flux towers, but simple lysimeters in the soil. And it was very interesting. He did not share anything of his results. He had them in a drawer, but the drawer was locked. Okay. And we were working together on the model. And then I said, well, I think today on this field, you had some 4.6 millimeter. And he said, whoa. And then he opened it and it was 4.7 millimeter, you know? You did it sort of double blind. Yeah, double blind. And he was an authority already in the US. He's also really a co-author for many FAO publications. So once those, stars are supporting new technologies, that's good for the general acceptance. Got it. Yeah. So I mean, it's funny that you didn't mail a floppy disk, you literally mailed yourself. Yeah. But that was the way you originally did it. And then I guess the movement grew to include more and more people, but I guess the internet came along and became easier and easier over time. And then new observational data started coming up. And I guess that kind of then took on its own life. Yeah, that's how it went. It was interesting that you said that you came from a farming family. And that was your original motivation, because unlike most academics, instinctively understood the end use case, which most people don't. But you started off because of your background. I mean, the use case was a given. You kind of maybe had it in your blood. Explain to us the irrigation use case and what you thought about and how did that unfold? Yeah, no, I have seen many farmers struggling with irrigation. In the Netherlands? In the Netherlands and in also other countries that I was visiting. And we had many research projects. And I found out that actually there is a big will from farmers to do better. Sometimes farmers are always looked at, the ones not being efficient or not taking care of sustainability. But farmers are, I think, in their heart. But they need some assistance and they need some help. Okay, so we have done a number of studies, and then we looked also, for instance, at a number of performance indicators, like, hey, are you doing okay? One of the very simple things is the uniformity of water distribution in a single field. Is it uniform or not? And in the old days, you need about 20 people standing in the field, checking where the water was flowing, and report and so on. But now with the 10-meter pixels, we can see the soil moisture everywhere, So we can really then say, hey, your distribution last week was not so good. We can start giving feedback. And I've always been intrigued by reaching out to the farmers and to the applications. And then we found out also that there are other things which makes irrigation management good. Like, is it adequate? Is there, you can have water and you can have moisture and a certain water storage in the root zone, which is very, very important. But in the end, it's also about, is it adequate? And one way to calculate the adequacy is, okay, how many days in the season did you have stress? And because this is something everybody understands.
Right.
If you tell you had 130 days in your growing season and only 3 days you had water stress, then it's like, hey, wow, I did very well. But if you tell a farmer, you had 40 days or 50 days of stress, then actually a farmer can learn, and that is still a process that I think we have to give more attention to even these days.
Yeah.
But already from the start, I have been highly motivated to get in touch with them and see what is happening. And if I can speak about these days, of course, now you mentioned already all the developments in IT, and there are many more companies. India, by the way, is an extreme good example of young agtech companies. Almost every week you have a new one. I visit India also on a regular basis. Every time I see new companies, and it's good. They help to get the message across and guide farmers. It is now technically possible.
Let me just say something that might not be obvious to people who are listening. So in India, sometimes you have such small plot sizes that it's not obvious, like what you can see from space, that the farmer can't just do by touching the ground. But when you're talking about really large land holdings, where there's part of the field which is drier, that's not obvious to the farmer, and there you can really add value to something where the farmer can't actually tell. In Netherlands, what are the sizes of farms that you're talking about that you might have grown up in, for example?
Yeah. See, if you talk about the size of a farm, it's usually in 50, 60 hectares. And then within that farm, they have a number of different fields.
Right.
And India is much smaller, of course. But it's something very interesting, if I can share with you. Because people talk about precision agriculture for a long time.
Right.
And now they talk also about precision irrigation.
Right.
And it comes from Australia and USA and big machines and big plants. But where people really do the real practice of variable rate irrigation, precision irrigation, is India. And you know why? Because they have that 1 acre field.
Then they've got to squeeze out the maximum productivity.
And we gave them information. We gave literally information to the farmer on their moisture distribution. And they take the hose.
Yeah.
And they say, okay, then I irrigate there a little bit more and there a little bit less. And they save 20% of water.
And improving their yields.
And also improving the yields.
They're not necessarily interested in saving water, but they're definitely interested in making sure that no part of their field is water stressed.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is something interesting that I really am happy to speak about, because I think that especially the Indian farmer is totally ready to accept these new technologies and really save water if he gets or she gets the proper guidance.
So the important thing is we're not necessarily talking about like an IoT thing where valves are going on and off, but it even just a picture of your field saying here's the dry part is enough to tell you, okay, go and put a few cans of water there.
Exactly.
And it could be very, very low tech in the intervention.
Low tech. And I think you have seen one of the examples I demonstrated to you. We do traffic light style, right? So it's green is good, blue is too wet, orange like watch out, and red like, oh, you're too late. This is something everybody understands. We provide it to the farmers, even in 15 different languages in India. So local language, and they understand the colors. And then, they can see, oh, I have to go here or I have to go there. And then I'm very fascinated by that. People always think like, oh, it has to be modern and in big countries and big farms. No, not at all. We can start here.
This is the individual farmer use case. Can you tell me some of the management use cases that you've encountered as well?
Sure. So at the same time, we can also look at command areas as a total.
Right.
Or to water user associations or water use cooperatives. We can also help groups of farmers. And that is also sometimes very nice, especially under conditions of water scarcity. So there is a shortage and people feel like, oh, how to deal this year? Let's say the reservoir or the river is only at a low level and everybody knows there is stress and we have to reduce. But in general, that is accepted if the level of stress is fair, which is the same for everyone. If you give little stress to the head enders and more stress to the tail enders, it's not good. So we can also help by saying, hey, there a little bit more water, there a little bit less water. So really to help this whole operations and make it more fair. And that is something the agencies need to know. They have to know, like, okay, this canal maybe a little bit more water, here the gate a little bit less open or more open. And of course, that is the situation for the system with canals and gates. But these days, there is a lot of pressurized water, piped water, and even SCADA systems that can be programmed. And I see huge changes coming. I think, again, India is leading worldwide with MCAT program.
That's the modernization of command area development.
Yeah. But it's a serious investment, high level, and I think it's a good vision. You have 75 million of irrigated land, hectare, and it is so good to gradually replace these very big leaking canals into something with pipes and SCADA and just provide the water that is needed. So agencies are really interested into that, and they are really concerned about how is the equity. Are we really giving the water the same? How is the adequacy? It's like how much stress do we have? But also reliability, if I can mention that as well, because the reliability also means that you expect the water to come and it is coming. Because if that is the experience that I know the water is coming, then you can invest in maybe a higher value crop, or maybe you can go to perennials with fruit crops, with mangoes or whatever. So the reliability is something also very important. And since we have daily measurements now of satellites, also because the company I'm working for, we have our own satellites, so we have private satellites, we can have daily coverage. And that really is a guarantee, like, okay, every day I get an image, I get an update on what to do and not to do.
Do you have our episodes running in the background? If you're curious about a technical term that we've used or an acronym we've forgotten to expand, we have on-screen explanations that we offer on video. One of the things that we've talked about is productivity of water. And I think you said something really important, which I just wanted to break down, because the only solution we have in India today is if you're using too much water, you can't go and tell farmers just use less. The only way you can do it is to tell farmers you can use less by showing them they can make more money by using less. Right? Which is what you talked about. The game, therefore, is reliability. And for reliability, you need data, which is why data becomes sort of such a central piece of the larger security solution. And that's why then people are willing to pay for it. And there's an entire agri-tech company, set of companies.
So in that sense, I think it's always essential to compare, on the one hand, the water, the volumes of water, but also with the
timings.
The timing, and the outcome. So what crop yield, what is the crop response to water, and finally it's how many rupees you get from a cubic meter of water.
And you are also doing the crop response with the other bands in your is that right? You're using essentially some kind of a greenness index so on, or is there something else?
No, you're correct. And we can also look at the type of crop. So there's always some discussion on what is the crop type and what are the boundaries. I have to say that especially during the last 1 or 2 years, a lot of technological breakthrough, mainly also because of AI, of course. In the past, we were struggling, what is exactly the field boundaries, and is it chickpeas or is it oilseed? Now we can do those classifications. So everything really gets much more accurate. So things that in the old days were not so well known because the pumping station has a volume, there is a head regulator, they know the discharge and volume, but what happens later, the people don't know. Now we can really, using the satellite images, we can see exactly with the moisture. So if I see a field in the tail end is wet and it has a moisture of 42%, whatever, then, and there was no rain, then I know for sure irrigation happened. So we can really make a kind of analysis. Sometimes I call it an irrigation scan. We can scan a system on what is happening.
So can you explain to us a little bit about accuracy? Because I think one of the skepticism on these things always is that, is this accurate enough? So What's kind of the state of accuracy on both soil moisture and ET at the moment, and where's sort of the next frontier of that?
Yeah. We have done many validation studies in different countries. It is a fact that on a single day, the accuracy is maybe only 80 or 85%. But also we know that, there is a kind of a systematic deviations. And if you go for a longer period, this cancels out. So I'm happy
So
to...
if you integrate it over a month, you're going to
Yeah.
have better
Oh,
accuracy
much
than if you
better.
do it at a daily.
Yeah. I have done several studies on what is the accuracy on a day or a month. And there's a lot of difference. Usually on a month or longer, it's 95% accurate. And that's also what our papers show. And I have to say also other researchers have come to similar conclusions. This is on ET. Moisture is maybe a little bit less, but also we are making really good progress there on moisture. We have many moisture campaigns. I have to say also, I'm here in Bangalore today. There is this super institute, the Indian Institute for Science, and they have very nice watersheds with many years of soil moisture data. So we are also still, taking new opportunities of validation and calibration and so on.
Fantastic. So let's kind of move on to how you went from looking at sort of productivity, irrigation advisory, at the Canal Command area and the individual farm to this broader idea of water counting.
Yeah.
And you're also kind of one of the early, I don't want to call you the father of everything, but promoters of water counting. How do you move from SEBAL to water counting?
Okay. Here we have to make a link to IMI, the International Water Management Institute. I also was a guest researcher for several years with them. And really, in that period, new concepts were developed. The water accounting is one of them, from David Molden. He's a fantastic researcher. But also the water productivity and even the more crop per drop is from IMI.
Right.
Now the whole world is copying this, but sometimes it's also good to recognize where it's coming from. So IMI is a very good in those new things. And then I realized, because I got very excited about the concept, because water accounting is looking more to water on the usage. So it's not the hydrological cycle, what some people think. And hydrological cycle speaks about rain and runoff and ET and some withdrawals, okay? Water accounting is much more like, withdrawals? Okay, where? To whom? To a crop? Or is it going to, which actually happens a lot, to environmental systems, because in a natural way, also they withdraw a lot of groundwater or they intercept water from other places. So water accounting also looks at what does it mean? What is the impact on society? What's the benefits? One other example is we have renewable water every year, like a longer term renewable water. And you want to compare that with the withdrawals. And now there was this recent report from the United Nations on water bankruptcy, which mainly gives a warning like the renewable water is already used and overused and so on. So these kind of things we can get from water accounting, not from a hydrological model. So that is a very fascinating thing. But after 10 years, I realized there were not many water accounting studies because there was no software to create them. Okay, so I started at that time at TU Delft with Professor Hubert Savenije, which I think also you interviewed, and I started this chair on water accounting. And actually, I became the first professor in the world on water accounting. And it's very nice. Until today, we still have working with PhDs on further refinement and improvement, and really getting to a point that you give a watershed or a river basin, can be a large or transboundary river basin. We have the software, and a few hours later, you get all the accounts. How much water is withdrawn, and what was the return flow, and what are the water management indicators. I think this is important because water is reaching many people. Many people are interested. But if you talk to a lawyer, or to a hydrologist, or to a civil engineer, or to a climatologist, they all speak differently about water. So I think it's so nice that we have one standard accounting.
Yeah.
And I'm remembering, if you allow me to make the analogy with the financial sector, that once financial accounting was introduced to evaluate successful companies, what is happening, that really improved the whole health of companies. And I think in water accounting, we want to do the same, that we have one standard data set. Once there is a conflict or, whatever, at least you can say, hey, we have one standard.
Right. And Government of India was very interested in doing this for all states. I think one problem is they didn't do it consistently. And so, every state did it slightly differently, so on and so forth. But here in Karnataka, we're continuing to work with ACRWRM, which is Government of Karnataka, to be able to do this at the sub-basin level.
Yeah, super good. So they are one of the examples that have been jumping on this opportunity. And also they realized that sometimes it has to be based on satellite measurements because they are there. They cannot be manipulated.
Right.
You can download them. So you have a very fair and transparent beginning of the data. It's a very funny thing. But if you look at a river at a boundary, the upstream country or upstream state, if they do the river flow measurements, it's always different than from the downstream. So what I'm saying is that, there's always some disagreements on the field measurement, and there is not so much transparency on exchanges. So I really believe that water accounting from satellite measurements is a way of standardizing things. It's just beginning. It took a long time. And maybe that is a fact that things are developed and research is done, but before really gets a product, it can be 10, 20 years later.
Amazing. Yeah. I just want to take a slight detour away because this is the Water Data Podcast for a reason, because we really are about what can you learn from observational data. But there is been in recent years with NASA and so on, a lot of interest in data model assimilation. And I was wondering whether you had any experience in looking at how that is. Because I guess what models can do is to allow you to fill gaps and predict what observational data cannot.
Yeah.
And so what do you think of that entire?
Yeah, this is a very good point. Models can indeed interpolate things where you have no measurements and so on. And models also can simulate scenarios in the future.
Right.
Especially we have the different climate scenarios. You can put in a hydrological model and you can see, hey, what happens with the water scarcity? If we do this, will it change? If we do that, will it change? And so on. So they are fantastic. But they are models. They are numerical things. They don't know about a farmer pumping groundwater or the city of Hyderabad growing every day, so that, agricultural land and forests are replaced by urban. And there are many anthropogenic influences on the system. Also, ecosystems may change or climate change. They have maybe different responses. So what I like a lot is we measure it from satellites like ET, like moisture, and then we feed that into the hydrological models. We have done that. We have done it on a number of occasions. I think it can be done more in general. I think it should become almost standard practice. We are not there yet. It's also related that scientific community is very proud of their own work. Too much, I have to say. So they always think their own model is the best. How can somebody coming with satellite images improve the model? And I know by experience that it really changes the outputs of the model. So, for instance, the model assumes a certain drought sensitivity, which is maybe not there because it's numerical, it's not real. And then if we see the temperature is 8 degrees warmer because there is some stress, then you can tell the model like, hey, you have
you missed something really important.
You missed something.
Exactly. And I think this is the piece where I really like the idea, because this is why I like data in general, but what you've shown from all of your highly spatially explicit data that you can see from satellite is it should spark curiosity, because you should be able to say, wait a minute, in field after field I'm seeing this. It's better just downstream of the bund or whatever. You can see 1,000 different patterns which don't look at all intuitive.
Sure.
And if you're able to kind of learn something about water itself fundamentally, because I feel as a field, we still haven't started scratching some of the deeper understanding, particularly in tropical systems, of What happens when biodiversity changes? What happens when you have certain types of species, traditional species replaced by certain hybrid species? What happens when you have, earthworms in zero budget natural farms? And you should start seeing redistribution of moisture in ways that were unexpected. And so if we could look at this and then really use that to develop all kinds of new scientific hypotheses. I mean, for me, that's just so exciting.
It is, absolutely. And you're 100% right that we have seen regen agriculture really changing the soil properties, the water holding capacity, and so on. We have done those kind of studies. One possibility is look at larger time series. So we can really see, hey, what was the situation before the regen intervention, and then after the regen intervention.
And over time, how did it evolve?
Over time. And that is fantastic information. And it is just, beginning to being used by the hydrological modeling community.
If you find this episode to be valuable, please like the video and check out our other show on this channel, The Well Labs Show. And don't forget to subscribe to the Well Labs YouTube channel. So I'm going to end because I've been giving teasers about sort of Irriwatch and now Irriwatch has been bought over by Hydrosat. So firstly, can you tell us why you decided to go the entrepreneurship way versus staying? I mean, you could have still had an academic product that was open. Why this particular route? And then what's the promise of what still remains to be done?
No, that's a good question. I have a deep respect for scientists because if we want to work on technological solutions, it starts with the science. And now we are in an era of many new technological solutions. So science is important. Then you get the technological solutions and more applications. But somebody has to bring it, to the clients and make it available at fingertips.
Right.
And that I have always been inspired, because I saw scientists essentially are only interested in journal papers.
Right.
They want citations. Their evaluations by the end of the year is based on citations. And
not by how many people used your science.
Exactly. And I have my opinion about that, but it will not change. So I thought, you know what? The scientists, they will still sit here 10 years later doing the same things. So I have to reach out. I have to do it by myself. Because you can have a company and then bring new technologies to the market. But if you are not a very strong engineer or scientist, to bring such product to somebody else, to a user or a client, they will say, I
mean, you're not going to be a very successful entrepreneur.
You will be bankrupt in a year, okay? So I thought, actually, you have to be yourself, the original developer, and then you can reach out to governments and to enterprises, and that formula worked. So I had a few different companies in my life. It was an internal drive. I had a few years that I thought, okay, now I do only academic work, but after 2 or 3 years, I thought, I miss so much the reality and the real acceptance and usage of the data. So
there's also a certain energy in entrepreneurs. If you're a university professor, you go kind of with the ebb and flow of university life. While I think the speed at which entrepreneurs move is just an order of magnitude higher.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating, You get a stimulation, if you talk to people who then use your data. So I started Irriwatch only in the year 2019. It's a relatively young company, but I knew it was possible and how to do it. And in 1 or 2 years, we were already in 20, 30 different countries. And then Hydrosat had very nice satellites by themselves, very smart satellites. And, we decided to go together. And I'm very happy because now we can really bring this kind of information to a much broader audience, So it is nice to be an entrepreneur and also really help people. And
I mean, I think the very practical piece of it is that how do you maintain these over time and keep abreast of technology? Because if you have an open source type of a model, maybe the code's written by a PhD student, the student graduates, you move on to a different topic, and then the farmer suddenly starts getting dependent on your product, and then you're like, I don't have the student anymore to update the code, which is, it doesn't work with academic funding models. You really do need to have continuous revenue
Yeah, I
stream.
know, absolutely. And so that means that there must be a commercial model behind it. Otherwise, you cannot survive.
Yeah.
And once it's commercial, you can also really develop new things in the house
Yeah.
that are maybe propriety, but are needed also to really make the difference.
I mean, it's not always. There are freemium models, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
there's, I mean, Google Earth is free, so there's clearly, different models
Yeah.
and different ways of getting revenue.
Yeah.
Wim, I want to go back to one thing that you said that was really interesting. You said somewhere that farmers are actually willing to pay for the data. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you reached that conclusion, and where did you get that from?
Oh, yes, certainly. We see this happening in many countries, but also in lower income countries like India. Farmers are really prepared to pay some 300 to 600 rupee per acre. Of course, they will do that only if they have a return on investment. If they see that they can get a higher yield, like maybe 10 or 20% more mangoes or strawberries, that's one option. Maybe they have some energy costs that by using the data, they irrigate less hours of water, so they save on energy and so on. So they see very quickly. These farmers are all entrepreneurs by themselves. And so if they see the value of the product, they are ready to also pay for the services.
What fraction of Indian farmers do you see are entrepreneurial enough that they're willing to pay for these services?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yes, because a farmer community has all kind of different mindsets, and it's very dispersed. I believe in general that there's always some 20 or 30% of the farmers who are really interested in high techs. They like to use gadgets. They have the newest mobile phones, but they have maybe GPS sensors on their equipment. But also, they want to use remote sensing or satellite based measurements. They feel cool to say, hey, I'm using satellite measurements. And it's not for every farmer. And that's maybe something that will gradually occur in the future. But let's start with the easier population of highly motivated farmers to take on these newest technologies.
I mean, of course, it's almost a caricature to think of the Indian farmer as this old guy who's wearing. A lot of these farmers are young, especially if they are educated and they've gone back to their family farms.
Yeah.
They're actually very technology forward in some way.
Yeah, and usually they grow up already in an environment that the farm is healthy. I mean, maybe larger areas, maybe several hectares, and already a good income for a longer time. And those younger ones wants to follow up on the farm. If you are a very poor rice farmer and you have very small fields, then as a youngster you think twice. Okay,
Right.
but if the family already has very nice land holdings and they do well, then they like it. And then they also use the modern technologies and the apps, So I think it's definitely feasible to reach out to these kind of persons.
Interesting. I mean, we kind of reached the end of the podcast, but I was wondering if you could tell us, if you were starting your career again today, what would you be excited about? What would you advise these young people? What's both from the pure technical kind of breaking the frontier of the science type of thing, as well as the use cases and applications?
Wow, yeah. In a way, I positively evaluate my own path. So start with a good education. If you want to become a specialist, which I advise, be good in something. Don't try to do everything. Be good in one thing. It means also you have to do some science, you have to do field work. Any student should have dirty hands, take internships, maybe more than I would do something else, because I did a very nice internship with the Royal Irrigation Department in Thailand, and I learned so much. Maybe now I would say, you know what, I do 3 internships, and go here, go there, and really learn. And then, of course, yeah, you have to be a solid person. So you cannot just, promise too much and so on. So you have to have a product and a technology, but also be able to, to take care it's working or it's accurate and so on. So it's very fascinating. And yeah, I always can see in my student lectures that there's always a few very interesting persons. many of the students, they only
Who have
look.
the spark.
Yeah, they have the spark, and others they look again on the mobile phone, what's happening, but you have the ones with the spark. The eyes are really, on listening, and they are very interesting. And I always encourage them to go for something. Don't be shy. Approach also maybe a senior person in a proper way. Senior persons are also happy, by
Yeah.
young people being contacted. Like, hey, I want to learn a bit from you. Say, do it. Just do it and go for it. And there's a lot of things to be done. I really believe we are in an era of water scarcity. We have to do better. Still, I see farmers having, let's say, 100-kilo banana per cubic meter, and the next farmer with the same soil, the same climate, has maybe 300 kilo. So there is still a lot of things to be done. We can improve agriculture. We can improve water management. We have to do more basin scale water accounting also to solve and prevent conflicts. So many things to do in the world of hydrology and water management. So yeah, I think I'm very happy that you have this dedicated podcast on this topic. Hopefully, this message
Hopefully you inspired a new generation of people to follow in your footsteps.
Then it would have been a lovely day.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today, Wim. It's been a great conversation.
Okay, thank you, Veena.
That's it for this episode of the Water Data Podcast. Thank you for listening till the end. If you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe to the Well Labs YouTube channel and share this episode with your friends and colleagues. You can also find the Water Data Podcast on all podcast platforms. Until then, stay curious and stay connected.